Imagine with me if you were preparing for a career of some sort, and maybe you were preparing for a career in the trade, and we'll just say you're preparing to become a furnace repairman. And so rather than go off to some school, some technology institute, you sign up to be an apprentice of another well-respected local service repairman in your community. And so you sign up and he invites you to come and go with him day by day by day. You work there, and as you work for him, he's teaching you how to become a good service repairman for that appliance. He teaches you not only how to figure out what's wrong with furnaces and how to fix them, but there's a whole bunch of other things that go into having that sort of a business. Where do you order these parts from? How do you know when to order from this distributor versus this distributor? How do you professionally deal with the people that you work for, that you do work for? They call you over to their house to do work. How do you interact with them in a professional manner? How do you return when there's a warranty issue involved that you need to fix? And who do you turn that into so that you're not charging them for that? There's just so many things that go into having a business. How do you know how much to charge for different services that you're treating the customer well and they're not feeling like they're being overcharged, but it's enough to make a living? How do you manage the finances? How do you manage your time? There's just a lot of things that are there to learn. And so some of those things are learned in the classroom setting of sitting there and having that man instruct you and teach you and show you, here's how you figure out that this element has gone bad. Here's how you test for this problem. But then a lot of things they just learn by watching. They pick up on how he interacts professionally with various customers. They hear how he explains maybe a complex issue, but how he simplifies it in a way that they can understand. And so over the months, you're there with this man, you're learning this trade, and then one day you show up for work and he says to you, hey, I've got a customer over here. They've got something going on with their furnace. How about you go by yourself and you figure it out and you fix it? And your eyes get big, and this is the first time you've ever not been side by side with a professional. This is the first time he sent you out by yourself to go and do the job that you've been more or less watching and helping him do. You feel very much like, I'm going to get into something and I'm not going to know what I'm doing. My knowledge level is still very basic. And he assures you, hey, if you run into issues, just pick up the phone and call me, and I'll help walk you through it. That's sort of where we're at this morning in Matthew chapter 10. Jesus has invited various young men to be his apprentices, to be his disciples, to learn from him. They're quite raw still, but they've been watching and learning. They've been sitting at his feet. They've been hearing him teach. He's been saying some very profound things. They've never heard anyone teach like him before. They've watched how he interacts with people with love and compassion, how he treats them very differently than the religious leaders that they're used to talk to people. The religious leaders had this air of superiority and they were sort of the expert, and Jesus just comes down to their level with compassion and love. He doesn't look down on them. He doesn't condescend to them, and the people love him for it. They watch how Jesus interacts when the religious leaders come at him with arguments and criticisms. And Jesus is always able to take what they say and turn it around back on them. They end up looking like a fool. And I'm sure as Jesus sends his disciples out for the first time to go out on their own to do the sort of ministry he's been doing, they've got to be thinking to themselves, what happens when the religious leaders challenge us? I'm not smart like Jesus. I'm not quick-witted like him. I'm not able to come back and respond like he will. In no time at all, I'm going to look like a fool. What happens when a person needs healing and they come up to me and they ask me, I don't have the kind of powers he has. They must have felt very inadequate as Jesus sends them out. But as we see this morning, as I've entitled the message, the training wheels are coming off in Matthew chapter 10. No longer are they just going to sit at his coattails, kind of watching him being spectators. Jesus says, now it's time for the next stage of your discipleship, the next stage of your learning. You're going to go out and you're going to do the ministry. And the thesis really of this morning and next week, because this message has morphed into two parts because it's just too much to cover in one message. But Matthew chapter 10, verses 24 and 25 really summarizes the thesis of what chapter 10 is about. Jesus says, a disciple is not above his teacher. You could say he's no different than his teacher. It's not a different set of standards that apply to him. Nor is a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher and the servant like his master. And what happens if you read Matthew chapter 10, especially if you read it through in the context of Matthew chapter 8 through 10, which is the unit, what you're going to find is Jesus is basically telling his disciples, the things that I've been proclaiming, you go and proclaim. The kind of work and activities and ministries that I've been doing, you go and do those same activities. And the way that they've treated me, the way that you've seen me get treated at times with hostility, you better anticipate that you're going to be treated the same way. That is essentially what Matthew chapter 10 is about. Jesus is sending them out to do and say and prepare to be treated the same way that he is in Matthew chapters 8 and 9. So this morning we're going to look at 5 of a total of 8 principles that we're going to see in this chapter. We'll look at 3 of them next week. But the first 5 we're going to see this morning and look at together. The first is a shared assignment. Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 through 4. Jesus lays out a shared assignment for his disciples. It says in this, and he called to him his 12 disciples, and he gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. The names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the zealot and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Notice that Jesus is sending them out as a group together. It's a team effort. He's not just sending one of them out, he's sending them all out collectively. And you see that these are very different sorts of people. I mean, there's definitely some things they had in common. They were all Jews. They were all men. But there's also things about them that are quite different. He's not just looking at one sort of person who thinks one sort of a way and says, you're the ideal disciple. You go and you do the ministry. I mean, particularly here in these verses, 2 of the people that are given an explanatory reference couldn't be any different. You've got Matthew, the tax collector, and Simon, the zealot. I mean, to think about how different those political perspectives of these 2 people were. Matthew, the tax collector, the one who's seen as the representative of the Roman government, the one that Jews typically hated because he was everything about the Romans that they wanted to resist. He represented their right and their authority over them to tax them and to take money from them. On the other hand, you have Simon the zealot, a zealot being one who believed in using whatever means possible to overthrow the Romans, to use force and even violence if necessary as Jews to take back their country. I have to imagine, what those discussions, what the discussions were like between these 2, especially early on. Now, of course, Matthew had left behind the tax collector booth, and maybe he had some changes of opinion and had viewed that differently. But I have to imagine there was still a sense of loyalty to some of what he did and a sense of defensiveness that, what he was doing had a place and was okay and right. The group as a whole was made up of very different people with different perspectives. And what we see is that Jesus is willing to send out even people who had wrong perspectives. I mean, one of the 2 of these guys were wrong. Maybe they both were. But Jesus takes these guys with very different views, very different attitudes, very different political affiliations, if you would, and he sends them out to do the work. And he doesn't even mention that we see politics. Jesus doesn't get into their specific political emphases, if you would, in their own minds as it related to the Roman government and the Jewish nation. Jesus is instructing them with things related to a different kingdom. Beyond that, these are guys that are very flawed. I mean, it comes up in some of the other descriptors here. Of course, you have the Judas Iscariot who betrayed him. I mean, this is a guy who wasn't even a true believer, and Jesus must have known that. This was a pretender. This was a guy who we found out later was a thief, stealing from the mission. We've already seen Matthew, the tax collector. Peter is mentioned here. He would later deny Jesus. Thomas is listed here. Again, later we'll find out about him. He's one who struggled in his faith to believe. He's referred to as Thomas the Doubting One or Thomas the Doubter. So these are very flawed people. They're not just people with different opinions and different perspectives. These are people who have real significant flaws that will impact their commitment to Jesus. And yet Jesus sends them out and says, you guys go and do the work. And you don't need me right there with you to do it. Now, I say that sort of tongue-in-cheek because part of the reason that he's able to send them out is because he's going to promise to send his Spirit who is going to be right there with them. But Jesus sends out very flawed people. And so when we look at this idea of us as his disciples, it's very easy for us to think, wait a minute, I don't have what it takes. I mean, I'm sure I'm wrong about some things. There's a lot I don't know. There's a lot I don't have answers to. I know of things about me that even nobody else knows. There's flaws about me. There's issues. There's things I deal with, things I struggle with, things internally I wrestle with that I don't want even people to know about. And yet God says, I'm sending you out. Jesus says, I trust you. I am sending you out to be the one who takes the message and the ministry forward. And we see two things, and I already alluded to the one, but first, we see that there's this assumed dependence, and this is a theme that comes up in various places throughout Matthew 10, but the first is that they would be dependent on others. He sends them out assuming that they would be dependent on others, that they weren't going to carry the load and carry the ministry all themselves. In fact, other parallel passages to this one in Mark and Luke actually say that he sends them out 2 by 2. He sends them out in groups. He doesn't send them out alone. The implication is they're gonna depend on each other, that they're gonna go out in teams for a reason. But even beyond that, in verses 9 and 10, for example, in his instructions to them, Jesus says, acquire no gold or silver or copper for your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff. In other words, don't take extra money. Don't take extra supplies with you. Why? Well, he says, because the laborer deserves his food. And then he's going to go on to explain, when you get to these towns, you're going to expect that the people there are going to take care of you. You should be able to expect as a laborer, as one who is an itinerant ministry, who is taking the message and a ministry to various Jewish towns, you should be able to expect that people in those towns will take care of you. They will supply your needs. You're to depend on them for help. We'll see this a little bit more next week, but look at verses 40 through 42 at the end, jumping to the end here. With this in mind, this anticipation that others are going to help to carry the load, not just others within your circle of disciples, but the people even that you're ministering to, that there is this reciprocation that you'll be depending on them to help. He says this, verse 40, whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me, referring to God the Father. The one who receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And the one who receives a righteous person because he's a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. Again, it's the idea of losing the reward. It's just a reverse way of emphasizing by no means is he going to miss out on a reward. He's going to get a reward is what he's saying. Like even just the person that gives a cup of cold water to somebody, if that level of help, God's going to reward them. And he's not just going to reward them. He says, I'm going to give you the same reward that the disciple gets. The person who receives a traveling prophet into his home to care for him, God says that person's going to get the same reward as the prophet gets. That God values the team effort, that the one who says, yeah, you can stay in my home and I'll provide food for you and I'll provide water for you so that you can do your ministry. God says, I'm going to treat him equally, that it's a team effort, and the ministry of the prophet is only made possible by the one who opens up his home and is hospitable and houses him and feeds him. God says they all get the same reward. Now think about the implications of that more broadly in the Christian faith today even. It's the one who helps to send the money to support the missionary receives the same reward as the missionary who goes. It's the one who provides a place for the missionary to stay when they come home on furlough, receives the same reward as the missionary who goes. It's the one who provides the food for the snacks for VBS, receives the same reward as the teacher who gets up and leads 3 or 4 kids to Christ that week. He says, hey, not everyone's wired to be the upfront teacher. Not everyone's wired to do this element of ministry well. But if you come over here and you help provide and facilitate for the broader ministry, God's going to reward you similarly, equally. If you're the one who's pouring cups of cold water to hand to the kids after game time, it's no less important. The reward is no less significant than the one who's prepared all week to get up and give a lesson, and they've practiced their Irish accent art so that they can do a good job for those kids. You think, man, I could never get up and do that in front of all those kids. That's okay, because it's a shared assignment. They would be dependent on others for the broader task. But not only are they going to be dependent on others, but he says that they would be dependent on him. They would be dependent on Jesus, verses 19 and 20. If I could get to the right chapter. Verses 19 and 20, he says, when they deliver you over, do not be anxious about how you are to speak or what you are to say. For what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Now, one of the things that I found interesting as I was just reading through this multiple times and studying Matthew chapter 10 and this initial commissioning of these disciples is that there's a lot of parallels between Matthew 10 and Matthew 28. Many of you are familiar when I say Matthew 28 because it's a key verse for the church. The Matthew 28, 18 through 20, the Great Commission where Jesus sends out his disciples just before he ascends into heaven. But there's a lot of parallels with the commission of Matthew 10 and the commission of Matthew 28. And one of them is this promise that his Spirit would go with them. That his Spirit would help to empower them in the moments when they need it. He says here, look, you're going to be dragged in front of courts. You're going to be dragged in front of synagogue leaders. You're going to be expected to give an account and to know what to say. And look, don't worry. My Spirit, the Spirit of my Father will be with you in those moments. He will give you the words to say. He will enable you to do what you need to do in those difficult moments. In the Great Commission, Matthew 28, 19 and 20, Jesus says, he tells them all these things they are to do. And he says, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. My Holy Spirit is going to be with you in every moment. You can depend on me to help you. If you take it back to my initial illustration of the furnace repairman, it's the furnace repairman telling his disciple as he's sending him out, who knows he doesn't know near as much as this guy who's been doing this for decades. He says, look, you run into trouble. If you find something you don't know how to do, give me a call. I'll be happy to walk you through it. I'll be happy to help you in that moment. This is what Jesus is saying to his disciples. My Spirit will be with you. Even when he's gone from this earth in physical form, my Spirit is there to help you. And so there's this on a shared assignment that's being given in Matthew chapter 10. But then secondly, and it's related, but it's separate, is that there's a shared authority. This is shared in a different way. The first shared is multiple people helping out. This is shared in the sense of delegation. Verse 1, Jesus says, He calls to him his 12 disciples, and he gives them authority over these unclean spirits and to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. Jesus shares his authority with his disciples. Again, there's another parallel here with the Great Commission, because in Matthew 28:18, it begins, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples. Because I have all of this authority, I have the authority to call you and send you out to go and do this. You have my authority. You stand behind my authority when you go out and you teach and you confront and you minister. A couple truths that fit this. Number one is when you think about going out in his authority, we represent him. We do it in his name. It's ultimately based in his authority. It's sort of like that repairman, that furnace repairman saying, remember whose uniform you wear. Remember the name of the company that's on the back of this uniform when you're out there. When you're interacting with customers, when you're thinking about how to treat them, when you're thinking about whether to do good work or shoddy work. You're doing this in my authority. You're there representing me. You're there because I'm giving you access to my customers. Don't forget. But then secondly, beyond that, is that our authority itself is rooted in him. Our identity is in him. I like to think about a police officer, who goes through the months of training that they go through, and then comes the day when they're handed the badge that they're able to take with them and wear. And they're sent out into the streets to police, to enforce laws. That badge represents an authority. The right to pull people over, the right to detain people, the right to arrest people, the right to hand out fines, the right at times to direct traffic, whatever. There's different things that they have authority that's delegated to them. I have to imagine the very first time they have to detain someone or arrest someone, it must feel pretty intimidating. It's like, do I really have the ability to tell this guy he's not free to go, that he has to stay here? And especially if the guy's 1.5 times his size. I mean, I can't imagine, I'm not a very big guy. I can't imagine having to go up to an unusually large guy and confront him and tell him, you need to stop what you're doing right now and you're not free to go. In fact, put your hands behind your back. I mean, it's got to be going through your mind. Wait a minute. I can tell somebody that's my size or smaller maybe. I feel a bit more comfortable, but this guy. And in those moments, you have to realize my authority doesn't come from my strength. It doesn't become because I'm smarter than this guy. I mean, maybe he's a lawyer. Maybe he knows the law better than I do. My authority isn't based in me being the smarter of the two or the bigger or the stronger of the two. It's that I'm representing something far bigger than both of us. As a police officer, you're representing a state or a local government. You're representative of the authority of the government. In this case, you're representative of Jesus Christ himself. And the point is, Jesus is saying to them, look, you may feel intimidated, like, well, who am I to tell these people that they're wrong and I'm right? Who am I to try to minister to them and address these needs? Jesus says you're going in my authority. For us, it's very easy maybe to get intimidated by the thought of ministry. I don't know enough. I'm not smart. And I mean, some of the people I'd be ministering to are smarter than I am. They know their Bibles better than me. Some of the kids I'm going to be ministering to maybe know their Bibles better than me. Some of the people that I'm going to try to minister to are more talented than I am. Am I really the one to engage in this ministry before them? I'm going to leave it to the people more talented than me, the people smarter than me. I'm intimidated by the idea of being sent out as a disciple by Jesus. And Jesus would say, look, you stand with my authority to minister on my behalf. I have sent you out. I don't care if they're smarter than you. I don't care if they're more talented than you. I don't care if they're more experienced than you. You're part of the team. Go and be emboldened that you have the authority and the calling to minister. Now, what about this reference to casting out the unclean spirits, healing every disease, healing every affliction? Do we have authority to do all of those things? many of you know that this is a sort of issue that's highly debated in the church today. There are some that would say yes. There are some that would say no. I would point out that there are various points of Matthew chapter 10 of the instructions that Jesus gives his followers that are particular to them and to their situation, and they don't carry over to us. We'll see in a moment, verses 5 and 6, Jesus is explicitly going to say, go to the house of Israel only, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the Samaritans. Well, that was advice, that was instruction for those disciples at that time that doesn't carry over into today. In fact, this is a point of contrast with the Great Commission. Matthew 28, 19 and 20, this is going to be reversed. Similarly, verse 9, he gives instructions, don't take extra money or sandals or clothes for the journey. In Luke, we're going to see that you would see that there's a separate time where Jesus sends the same group of people on a separate trip, and this time he explicitly tells them the opposite. Take some extra money, take an extra staff, take an extra tunic. And he even reminds them, you remember back when I told you not to take an extra one, not to take extra money? Well, now I'm reversing it. Like it was a different situation. The different situation called for a different set of instructions in some ways. And so, again, some of these instructions were particular to the audience that he was speaking to, his 12 disciples who would become the 12 apostles during the first century. We can't just immediately take every bit of instruction and try to apply it directly to us. Later, he's going to warn them about being flogged in the synagogues, that we don't typically take that in a specific sense to heart, because I don't know of anyone in here who ministers in synagogues. And so it's not a cop-out to say that it's very possible that some of the specifics of the instructions that Jesus gives don't carry over to us today. For those who believe that the sign gifts have ceased, that the sign gifts were relegated to the first century, particularly to the Jewish audience, or that the way in which that they were given out, with the ability of his first disciples to carry out miracles, apparently at will. I mean, even here he specifically says to heal every disease. He doesn't just say sometimes you'll heal a disease. He says, I'm giving you the authority to heal every disease and every affliction. Even people that believe in the continuation of that sort of sign gift today usually recognize that it doesn't always work, whatever that means. That it's not always something that is effective, that it seems to be at least at a different level, a different degree of healing ministry today. And so I would say that I think there's a principle here of caring for people, of doing ministry and helping weak people and helping sick people and helping poor people, whether there's gifts of miracles or not, is that debated question. Our church, and my personal opinion, is more of a cessationist view that those gifts are no longer in effect, certainly in the same way that they were then. I do believe that we still have authority over the demonic realm. I do believe that we are to engage against the powers of darkness, against the demonic forces, and that we have the ability to speak authoritatively to them, to make Satan flee, to tell him to leave, and possibly then that would even intersect with issues related to healing if certain diseases or afflictions are a direct result of the work of Satan, as they sometimes are. As we resist Satan, as we command him to leave in certain situations, it very well could result in a miraculous sort of healing. Thirdly, then, I see a selective audience. Again, I've referenced this in verses 5 and 6, but look at what Jesus says to his disciples. Verse 5, these 12 Jesus sent out, instructing them, go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He tells them, limit your ministry only to the villages and the towns that are part of Israel. Don't go to the Samaritan towns and don't go to the Gentile towns. What's this about? Well, as I've already pointed out, this changes in Matthew 28. The Great Commission explicitly says, go into all the world, preach the gospel to all nations. So by the time you get to the end of Matthew, this mission has clearly expanded beyond Israel in Jesus' mind to the whole world. The book of Acts likewise makes the same point. It begins within Israel. It's something that begins in Jerusalem. It's a ministry to the Jews, but it very quickly expands in some interesting ways to the uttermost parts of the earth. Acts 1:8 predicts that's what would happen. So why does Jesus here want to restrict it to only the Jews? Does he not care about the Gentiles at this point? Does he not care about the Samaritans? I think we can see clearly that's not the case. In fact, within Jesus' own ministry, even up to this point, we've already seen Jesus minister among some Gentiles. He's willing to engage with the Gentiles. In chapter 8, there was a centurion who was almost certainly a Gentile who had a sick, dying servant. Jesus is willing to engage with him and heal him and even commends this Gentile for his great faith. A few verses later, Jesus is I can't talk today. Jesus is in the Decapolis, a very Gentile full place. He heals two demon-possessed men. And then a whole town of people come out and they ask Jesus to leave. Jesus is offering them the kingdom, essentially. And they say, no, thank you. A little bit later in Matthew, Jesus is going to engage with a Syrophoenician woman. He's going to tell her something similar. You're not a Jew. But her faith is going to compel him, and he's going to be willing to heal her daughter. Elsewhere, we'll see Jesus in John's gospel interact with a Samaritan woman on purpose. He intentionally goes through Samaria so he can have ministry there. So Jesus is not unwilling to engage with Samaritans and Gentiles, but he does emphasize throughout his ministry a priority for the Jewish people. In essence, these are people that Jesus and his Father already have a covenant relationship with. These are the ones that the promise of Messiah was given, and so he is engaging first with them as the ones to whom the promises were given. Again, if we go back to my illustration of the furnace repairman, it's like the furnace repairman saying, hey, we've already got a covenant relationship with a whole bunch of people we've sold furnaces to. We've got warranties promised to these people. Make sure they get priority. Don't prioritize new customers before you take care of the customers that we already have. And so make sure that you relegate enough time to fix the appliances that you've already sold to the customers that the customer base we've already built. And then as you have time and as there is extra resources available, sure, we'll go ahead and accept new clients, but you take care of your own clients first. That's why doctors sometimes don't take new clients, because they're already stretched as full as they can be stretched to take care of the clients they already have. Jesus alluded to this back in Matthew chapter 9 at the end, where he says, the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. We need more laborers to go out. And in light of the fact that there's limited laborers and a big harvest, Jesus is saying, make sure you focus on and prioritize my covenant people, the people that the promises were originally given to. But as we've said, as the workforce grows, by the time you even just get to Matthew chapter 28, Jesus is saying, look, the ultimate mission, the ultimate vision is the entire world. Gentiles, Samaritans, they're all welcome. That's our commission today. The entire world is our audience. Fourthly, Jesus tells them to give a special announcement when they go. There's really only one thing that he tells them to teach. The teaching element of him sending them out is quite simple in verse 7. Proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom has arrived. That's really their only message. And it's not like that was Jesus' only message, because, we already looked at Matthew 5 through 7, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus had a lot to say when it came to explaining, re-explaining, relearning in their minds what the law was and how it was to be applied. There's a lot about Judaism that Jesus wants to correct, but the only thing he tells his disciples is you just go out and tell them the kingdom has come. Which essentially meant the Messiah has arrived and it's me, it's Jesus. Point them to me. Tell them the kingdom's here and it's to be found in me, Jesus, the Messiah. That was essentially their mission. It's not all that different from what our mission is in Matthew 28, 19, and 20. We're told to make disciples of Jesus. Tell them about me. Point them to me. And specifically, tell them to obey everything that I have commanded. Look to Jesus, look to the things he's taught, the things he's commanded, and follow him. And if you want to simplify it, again, we have a pretty simple mission. When you think about what does it mean to be a witness, what does it mean to share the gospel, you could summarize it simply by saying, point people to Jesus. Find ways to let them know Jesus is the guy. Jesus is the man. Jesus is the one you need in your life. I hear what you're going through. That's really tough. Really, ultimately, what you ultimately need is Jesus. Who is Jesus? What's Jesus done for you? I mean, there's so many different ways that you could insert a simple point of pointing people to Jesus. Jesus is the kingdom. That's the kingdom we ultimately need. One more thing, and I really wanted to focus on this because I really think this is at the heart of what Matthew 10 is about. And that's number 5, what I've called substantiating activities. Jesus is going to tell them to do certain things. There's certain types of activities that they're to be about. And what I want you to see is I believe these activities were meant to substantiate their ministry before the people. In verse 8, Jesus says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. Again, if you've been following along in Matthew, from Matthew chapter 8 till now, these are the things Jesus has done. He's cleansed a leper. He's raised a dead girl. He's cast out demons. He's healed sick people. These are the things he's been doing in the last few chapters, and Jesus is saying, you do those same things. Well, why? What's that about? One of the commentators I was reading pointed something out to me I hadn't ever seen before that I think is substantial. Matthew chapter 9, 32 through 34, Jesus heals a demon-possessed mute person. It says, as they were going away, behold, a demon-oppressed man who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the mute man spoke. And the crowds marveled, saying, never was anything like this seen in Israel. But what do the Pharisees say in response? The Pharisees said, oh, he just casts out demons by the prince of demons. Verse 35 then picks up. We're not really told Jesus' response, but verse 35, it says, and Jesus went throughout all the cities and the villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless and so on. The Pharisees are trying to accuse Jesus of being motivated and empowered by Satan. Meanwhile, Jesus is out doing lots of good things, healing people, showing compassion to people, fixing their problems, meeting their needs. The commentator made the point, look, in context, verse 35 flows after verse 34 because it's basically Jesus is rebutting their accusation by his actions. He's showing that their accusation, that what he is doing is motivated by Satan, that he's actually working as part of the kingdom of Satan, is a ridiculous lie. His kingdom doesn't have the same character as the character of Satan. And anyone with 2 eyes and a brain can see that. Jesus is working on behalf of a kingdom that is very good. It is a compassionate kingdom. It is a kingdom that restores. What does Satan do? Satan makes talking people mute. Satan makes sound people sick. Satan makes living people dead. Jesus is doing the exact opposite. He's healing. He's casting out demons. Now, why is this significant to this? Because a little bit later in verse 24, look at what verse 24, we read half of it earlier. Verses 24 and 25, we read half of those verses earlier. It says, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher and the servant like his master. That means that if they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, another name for Satan, the prince of the demons, how much more will they malign those of his own household? Well, it's referring back to the end of chapter 9, where the Pharisees maligned Jesus and said, oh, you're just doing what you're doing by the prince of demons. Jesus says to his disciples, look, if they're going to make those ridiculous accusations about me, they're going to make them about you. They're going to say that what you're doing and that your message and the kingdom you're proclaiming is really just satanic. It's evil. How is it that we today refute those ridiculous arguments and claims that Christianity isn't just, not true. It's actually evil. It's actually bad. It's anti all of these people. It's unloving. It's mean-spirited. All of the things our society says today. How do we refute that? By doing good works. By healing people. By helping people that are weak. By showing compassion and acts of love and acts of generosity. The same way Jesus refuted it. He showed that the character of his ministry was not at all what they said it was. It was interesting. My family, we were in Cincinnati on vacation for just under a week, a few weeks ago. And while we were there, actually the last day we were there, you've got those little places where you can open up in town, and they've got little newspapers inside that you can pull out for free and read them. There's not near as many of those today as there used to be. But anyways, there was one there. And my brother opened it up and pulled it out to see what it was. And inside, I got a picture. This is what the cover of it was. I don't know if you can read that, but it's called City Beat. Sin Satanas, Cincinnati Satanists. The devil made them do good. And then as you read through it, it says, meet Sin Satanas, the Cincinnati nonprofit whose members clean highways, raise money for school lunches, and embrace Satan as a symbol, not a deity. And then it talks about the good works that this satanic group does. They have, by Interstate 75, exit 6, they've adopted that exit to clean, and part of the Adopt a Highway program, they keep that off-ramp and on-ramp clean. They also had something, no kidding, called Lunches from Lucifer, that raise money to reduce school lunch debts. They also collect goods for homeless shelters and clothing drives. And inside it said, what does it mean to be a Satanist? Sin Satanas identifies as a non-theistic satanic community, which means its members don't believe in an actual devil, but instead view Satan as a symbol. Satan is an adversarial figure. Satan represents their opposition to Christianity. It doesn't say that, but it references the Christian faith and all these things that Christianity stands for. Now, I got thinking about that a bit and just thought, how ridiculous is that? Okay, so I understand what it means not to believe that Satan's a real person, but you see him as a symbol. You see him as a fictional character that is symbolic of something. Okay, well, what is he symbolic of then? I mean, what fictional representations of Satan do you know of? Because everything I can picture, I remember cartoons like Tom and Jerry where, you have the Satan appears on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder. And what is the Satan figure always trying to tell you to do? Bad things, evil things, the things you want to do that you know you shouldn't do. And it's the angel figure on the other shoulder that's telling you, no, you should do the right thing. You should do the good thing. You should do the kind thing. Satan was never a symbol of good works. I mean, just look at the image there. Does that look like something that inspires goodness? He's got a pitchfork in his hand in the fictional representations of him. A pitchfork, horns on his head. He's got he usually has a menacing face. He's like the color red. He's oftentimes got fire around him. What does it generate thoughts about? This guy's meant to inflict pain. That pitchfork's meant to inflict pain. That fire's meant to inflict pain. Those horns are meant to inflict damage. He's a killer. He's a murderer. He inflicts harm. In no way does it make sense to say Satan is our symbol of good works. It's a ridiculous statement, but it's what people who hate Christianity are left to do because they know they don't want to do the things that Satan really inspires people to do. But the reverse is true. As Christians, we should be about good works. I mean, I've known some segments of conservative Christianity that downplays the value and the importance of just doing good things. They kind of dismiss it. Well, that's the social gospel. We're about proclaiming truth. We're about anything that we can proclaim actual truth. And what I see in this passage is, yes, proclaiming truth is very important. It's part of the thing that Jesus calls his disciples to do. But just proclaiming truth without adding good works leaves it susceptible to people saying, this is just a bunch of uncaring, unloving, stuffy people who only care about their so-called facts, and we don't even think their facts are true. They're just doing what they do in the power of Satan. Jesus rebutted that. He demonstrated the character of the kingdom he was announcing. He demonstrated the character of the God he represented by the good works that he was about. And what I see is that Jesus is calling his disciples to mimic him, to be like him, to commit to not just teaching certain things and saying certain things, but also to carry out the character of the kingdom they were announcing and professing. I hope as a church we will keep those things together, that we will be about both, about loving people in Jesus' name as well as telling them the truth that they need to hear so they can meet and be reconciled to the Jesus that loves them. Let's pray. Loving Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that you have given us your word. We're so thankful that you've given us your example. We know that we ultimately follow you, and our desire this week is to be even more like you. Help us to be aware of, to recognize ways that your Spirit would confront us and show us ways that we need to change so that we can be more like you, our compassionate, loving, healing, strengthening, enriching God. We pray these things in Jesus' name now. Amen.